Hey guys, James here with Detailed Image. Today we're going to do another Q&A session, this time talking about clay and decontamination. That kind of all falls under the decontamination category, but I kind of want to just talk a little bit about decontamination of vehicles in general, and then go into some specific questions that we have from you guys. Decontamination in general, what is it all about? Basically, what that is after a wash process, you need to further clean the surface, any of the surfaces of your car in some further way, whether the focus be on tar removal, whether the focus is on iron removal, whether it be on, maybe you have some adhesive, maybe it's bug guts, maybe it's bird droppings, whatever it may be. It's basically just kind of extra cleaning to get something that's really stuck on there removed. And there's levels to it, right? In not every case are you going to have to clay, and not every case are you going to have to use a tar remover. It's more about finding some level of decontamination that's going to fit your specific situation. So when I'm talking about this, I'm kind of almost going in levels of severity or aggressiveness of decontamination in general. So just kind of keep in mind as kind of we go through it, and see how each step is kind of maybe going to apply to your specific situation. The first step of really any decontamination, right, is going to be the wash process. So you want to get the surface clean just to see what there is to further clean. After you've done your wash process, the vehicle is obviously still going to be wet. Then you can kind of move in from there. So whether you have a ton of heavy dirt and grime that hasn't been fully removed in a traditional wash process, an APC bath or APC rinse might be needed in order to kind of break down that dirt even further, or that mud, and get the surface clean. So that's kind of the first level. Before you try anything else, I would say having a nice light all-purpose cleaner, low alkaline, not super aggressive, citrus-based. Try that. Let that basically dwell on the paintwork for a couple minutes, just making sure that the paintwork is cool, not in a sunny area. So the last thing you want is an all-purpose cleaner to ever dry in the paintwork. So while the paintwork is still wet, you're spraying that all-purpose cleaner, and you're allowing it to kind of chew up that dirt and grime. So that's kind of the first level. After that, say you might have some iron particles or some little rust spots. That's kind of the decon gel or the Iron X decontamination process. That process makes claying ultimately a lot easier. But in some cases, maybe just doing it chemically with Iron X or a decon gel might be all that the vehicle needs. Obviously, just like I said, the next step would be actually claying it. So the mechanical action of claying might be necessary to remove some roughness in the paint. A lot of times us as detailers, we do tricks. We'll put a latex glove on, and we'll feel the paintwork. And if we feel roughness to the paint, we'll know, okay, it's time to clay. Or you could visually just see, okay, I have a lot of kind of contamination on that paintwork. I'm going to have to use clay. Keep in mind, though, whenever you're claying, obviously you're rubbing the paint, and obviously you're going to have some sort of lubrication in between the clay and the paintwork, but you're still rubbing that paint, and there is a risk of marring your paintwork. So just keep that in mind. So whenever you're claying, there's definitely a risk that you're going to put in some scratches. So if you have a softer paint, maybe reserve claying only for a pre-detail type of decontamination. And that kind of brings me into another total side point, is there's kind of a decontamination pre-detail, before a full-blown detail, or kind of a decontamination when we're only talking about kind of maintenance washes and stuff like that. So keep that in mind. So when you're thinking about which one, or if you're using all these different steps, just keep in mind of which ones you might want to use before a full-blown detail, or which ones you might want to implement during your regular maintenance regimen. The next step after claying would be maybe if clay didn't remove some really stuck-on tar deposits or some adhesive or something like that, then you're going to be using a full-blown tar remover. That in itself might strip your wax or sealant. So you want to kind of keep that in mind. Maybe that you're only reserving if there's a really bad issue where it's kind of just in a particular area that you can easily put a wax and sealant back on. You just want to be cognizant that when you're using clay, you might put some scratches in it. When you're using a tar remover, you might remove the wax or sealant, especially if it's a pretty heavy duty tar remover. So you just always want to be thinking about the stuff that you're using to remove a particular problem or piece of contamination, because there might be an issue that you'll have to, or it might be another step that you'll have to do to kind of remedy the use of that product. And then the final bit in polishing is kind of a level of decontamination in itself. A lot of times I've seen on trucks, the tar is so bad that it almost leaves kind of an etching of where that tar spot was. Well, the only way to fully remove that is going to be through a polishing process. So you just always kind of want to be thinking about, okay, what's the issue that I want to remove or remedy, and how do I get there? And just kind of be always thinking about the different variables that lead into that. I have some specific questions that I thought we could kind of go over from here. And then again, if you guys have any questions at all, leave the comments below, and we can get back to you guys and try to and help you out on your specific detail and stuff like that. So first question, how do I safely clay? That is a great question. I guess the answer to that is a lot of different things. You can use a variety of products to do it. There's going to be a lot of different clays that you can choose from. For me, for general maintenance and for kind of a pre-detail, a fine grade clay bar is kind of my go-to. Something that's not super aggressive, is still going to get some roughness out of the paintwork, but isn't going to totally hammer your paint. Obviously, either using a quick detailer, a clay lube, or my preferred method, which is just some shampoo. You want some sort of lubricity between the clay and the paintwork to allow that clay to glide on the surface and pick up the contamination. The biggest rule of thumb is to not use too much pressure, because you're not trying to install any scratches. Because it has a sticky nature, you want it to pick up that contamination that's on the surface. So if you thought of it like this, if your paint is a flat piece of surface, contamination is kind of like little bumps on it, right? Whether it be tree sap or fallout or what have you, you basically are kind of these little hills in the paintwork. Then you have your soap layer and your clay is running over that surface. It's picking up all those little hills. So the biggest things I would think about when you're claying, or if you're thinking about, okay, I think I have a clay process that I want to do soon, is how soft is my paint? Am I going to have to polish the paintwork after? What type of contamination am I trying to pick up with the clay? And you just want to watch your pressure. And if you, again, I'm sure you guys already know this, but if you drop a piece of clay, you want to throw that out. Because it's so sticky, and it wants to pick up whatever it comes in contact with. So if you drop it on the ground, there's dust, there's dirt, there's debris on the ground. Well, then that's going to go in the clay, and then if you put it back on the paint, it's going to rub that dirt and nastiness into the paint. So you just want to be cognizant of that, and then you should be fine for a safe claying process. Still on the clay topic, traditional clay bars versus kind of the new gen clay alternatives, so like the nanoskin wash mitt and clay towels and things of that nature. And I love both, and I think they both have a place in your arsenal. We just talked about the negative side of clay. If you drop it, you have to throw it away. Well, that's a huge investment in product that you just wasted. The nice thing about the alternatives, the clay mitts and things of that, is if you drop it, you can rinse it out, clean it, and reuse it a bunch of times. The alternatives are something that typically lasts longer. You're not having to fold the clay and knead it around and kind of going back to proper clay procedure. That's another aspect to it. So as you pick up contamination, you want to be folding that clay bar and kind of exposing a clean side. These, you could dunk into a wash mitt, kind of wash away the contamination and keep moving. Now, I think they both have a place, and they both have a place for different styles or different paintwork. Some clay alternatives are a little too aggressive for soft paintwork, where sometimes even a clay bar can be too aggressive. So it kind of depends on your specific paintwork and the level of aggressiveness you're trying to do to remove the contamination. So they're both great. They both have their pros and cons. It's just more about your specific situation and which one might work best for you. Definitely both worth to have on hand for any detailing situation. The next question, how to safely remove tar. So tar is going to accumulate on your paintwork, no matter what, it's going to happen, but how to safely remove it. One of my favorite products is Stoner's Tarminator, or really you can use any tar remover. If you have a kind of an isolated tar situation, whether it be on the rocker panels or what have you, what I typically do is I'll do my wash process, I'll get the car clean, and then while the paintwork is still damp or wet, I'll spray a little bit of tar remover in a microfiber towel, and I'll lightly wipe that area. Again, keep in mind, if it's a soft paintwork, if you have to start rubbing, you're probably going to install some scratches, and you're definitely going to remove the protective product that you have on there. So you just want to be cognizant of that. If that is the situation, just keep in mind that, okay, I'm going to have to polish afterwards. But that's usually my method. Sometimes spraying the tar remover directly on the paintwork and letting it dwell. It depends on how severe the tar situation is. It will ultimately depend on what your procedure is going to be, whether it be letting the product dwell, whether it be spraying the product on a microfiber towel and kind of going over that area for a little bit. It'll totally depend on how bad that situation is. But rule of thumb is what we typically do is we'll spray a little bit on a microfiber towel and wipe lightly, and then kind of move up in your pressure as you kind of see if it's coming off or not. So if it's something that's super stubborn, you're going to have to use a little bit more pressure, but then just keep in mind the stuff that might be happening also, whether it be the removal of the wax, whether it be installing some scratches. So you just want to be cognizant of that. Next question. I have little spots that look like rust. How do I remove them from my paint? So typically those little rust spots are fallout or iron particles. The best remedy for those is going to be a decontamination gel like an Iron X, like anything like that that's going to remove fallout and iron particles. So what we typically do is, again, after the vehicle's clean, you're onto the decontamination step. While it's still wet, you're going to spray that decon gel on the paintwork. Typically let it dwell from like that 2 to 3 minutes. Could be more. You just want to make sure the surface is cool in the shade. And you're going to let that chemical reaction happen. And what those types of products do is they pull out the iron filings out of paint, and they'll remove those spots. Sometimes those spots can be so bad you kind of want to do the decon gel, the iron remover gel, in tandem with clay. So you want to do the iron removal part first, let it dwell, let the chemical reaction, let that purple chemical reaction happen, rinse. Then maybe foam up the vehicle again, then go into your clay process. So sometimes, depending on how bad those little rust spots are, those little kind of what look like rust spots, will ultimately determine how crazy you need to get with your decontamination. And then our last question is APC versus tar remover, when to use it, why to use it, all that stuff. I characterize those two products very differently. APC I would use for the removal of heavy grime, of heavy dirt, mud. If you just had a thick layer of dirt on your car that you wanted to remove safely in a chemical fashion without having to use a lot of pressure and without having to wipe. Tar removers are obviously for a very specific purpose, right? They're to remove tar, adhesive, something that's really stuck on there. I love tar removers, but I typically save those for a severe situation. So if you have tar, you have to get off immediately. Obviously, you have to use a tar remover. But just keep in mind, if you have to use a lot of pressure, you might install some scratches, like we were saying. You're going to strip off that wax or sealant. So you just always want to be thinking about what are the effects of the product that I'm using. It's a lot to sometimes think about, can be like overwhelming, but it shouldn't be. I mean, if you're on a regimen, a car care regimen, you're continually washing your vehicle throughout the year, you're kind of doing maybe two big details, right? Where you're going through this decontamination process, you're going crazy, you're doing the clay, you're doing the iron remover, you're doing the tar remover, you get everything clean, polish the paint, sealant's on, car looks amazing. You're driving it, it's on that regimen. You're washing, you're washing, you're washing. Okay, you just came out of winter, you reset again, you're doing this process, you're polishing, you're sealing, and then you're moving on. So you can kind of get the whole decontamination process in line with your regimen. And you can use it as needed. For me, sometimes I'll go, weeks without washing, ironically, and because my commute is crazy, and my car is loaded with contamination, and I'll have to do this whole process before I can really do anything else because the car is so loaded with different stuff. So just stuff to think about. If you have any questions at all, just comment below, and we appreciate you guys watching. And thanks again.